Hi everyone, I hope you're well and having a good week and looking forward to the weekend. There's only one more day to go. So today I would really like to introduce to you Johnson Matthey. So who is Johnson Matthey? They research and develop technologies to make a clean and healthier world, from manufacturing parts to reduce emissions in catalytic converters to developing medicines which are globally recognised. It's such a diverse company with locations all over the UK. I hope today we can give you more of an insight into who they are and what they do. Our relationship with Johnson Matthey has been a long one, hasn't it, Kerry?
It has. It has.
And their hub is really comprehensive. There's loads of different pages on there covering things like life at Johnson Matthey, key benefits, and all the learning and development opportunities which are open to you when you apply to their positions. Personally, what I really like about their hub is that they've got 3 employee profiles on there from Liz, Joe and Vince, and they detail all about the operations, science and commercial graduate programmes which are open to grads, and their experiences have been part of these. They're definitely worth a watch, so why not check out their hub after the webinar and also look at all the different information that they've got on there as well. Johnson Matthey also sponsor the chemicals manufacturing sector in the Grad Cracker Toolkit, as modelled beautifully here. You can collect these if you are on campus. I know it's a bit of a mixture out there about what everybody's doing, but if you are on campus, go and collect a copy from your careers service. Alternatively, it is now virtual or digital, should I say, in the Careers Centre. So if you flick to page 64, you'll find out more about who Johnson Matthey is, as a business and their opportunities which are also available. So just to introduce you to the panelists, I'll start with you, Krishna, because you've been there the longest. You're an old one now. So Krishna, having started on the science programme, is now a development chemist, and she's been at Johnson Matthey for 2 years. Dominic is currently on the commercial graduate programme, has been at Johnson Matthey for just over a year. And Hannah, who I refer to as the baby graduate, has just been at Johnson Matthey for a month, Hannah. But we'll go into Hannah's story a little bit later on, but she also did an internship as well at Johnson Matthey, so really good and interesting stories to tell. Right, honesty time now. This is where I would normally introduce you to the grads and obviously what they studied at university and which university they studied at. However, Krishna, you kind of put me off from doing this because your PhD, it absolutely blew my mind, and I thought, flipping heck, I'm nervous and I'm going to have to pronounce all those letters and words as part of a webinar. So I've switched it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is, Krishna, if we can start with you, my love, could you just go introduce yourself and what you studied at university? I know you studied a lot, and yeah, that's it. If we can start with you.
Yep, of course. So I did my undergraduate at the University of Manchester. So I did 4 straight years there, getting a Master's of Chemistry in medicinal chemistry specifically. So I didn't do a placement year in between. It was 4 straight years at Manchester.
Yeah.
I then moved on to the University of Bristol, where I did a PhD in chemical synthesis. So this involved me actually sort of rotating around different research groups within the university, and eventually I specialised in organometallic chemistry. So
that's what I didn't say, that bit.
That's usually where people stumble over, but that's fine.
I could say chemistry people out there who are watching. So what exactly is that, Krishna?
So organometallic chemistry is mainly the study of materials where essentially the central component of the molecules you're looking at is a metal. So it could be a transition metal, it could be something from the main group elements, so the sort of left-hand side of the periodic table. And then that is actually surrounded by some organic molecules around the outside. So that's splitting up the term. Organometallic is sort of that simple, like when we're looking at it. So I specialise a lot in the synthesis of these sort of different compounds. Specifically, I was looking at the platinum group metals, which links in very, very closely with actually Johnson Matthey, the fact that we deal with precious metals quite a lot. So yeah, that's actually where I ended up being introduced to Johnson Matthey. My supervisor actually I asked him for a certain platinum compound, and because they're so expensive, he pulled out this plastic wallet he had in his drawer in his office, and he was like, "Oh, here's some compounds that I've got from Johnson Matthey," and I was just like, "Oh, okay." And that's actually how I was first introduced to the company.
Your plastic wallet.
Yeah, and then after I finished my PhD, I actually joined the graduate program on the science stream. So that was just over 2 years ago now.
Super. Thanks, Christian. Thanks for explaining that. Oh, I won't use the word simple in that sentence. I was just thinking that is just not simple at all in my little brain. Dominic, you know, you're the next one in the line. So which university did you go to, Dominic, and what did you study?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Leicester, and I studied a 4-year master's degree in chemistry, where my third year was also in industry. So I spent a year out in industry, but also did exams in the same year. So it was still a 4-year course to get your master's. And then I finished that and applied for the Johnson Matthey commercial program.
Perfect. Thank you, Dominic. And last but not least, Han, over to you.
Hi, I studied at the University of Edinburgh. I did an integrated master's in chemical engineering. So I just did the program in 4 years. It's usually 5, but I went straight into second year, and I just joined Johnson Matthey a month ago. So I'm very new to the program.
You're new, but you present it brilliantly. So well done, Hannah. Thank you very much, grads. So later on, we'll get to speak to them a little bit further. So Sophie will be doing the Q&As with the grads. Kerry, I'm going to move on to you now. So Kerry is the graduate talent manager. Now, could you just start to tell the audience about who you are and kind of what your job entails at Johnson Matthey?
Sure. So, hi everybody, I'm Kerry Beer. I'm the graduate talent manager, as Carla's just said, and I joined Johnson Matthey about 2.5 years ago, specifically to look after this program. So, as Carla said, we've been having graduates into the business for how long? We're in your 10-year club now, aren't we?
Yeah,
so it's been going for a while, but we've never really run a program quite like this before. So one that connects all different parts of the business, all the different sectors, and is also a global program that looks after the UK, China, and the US. So I was brought in specifically to look after the graduate program and the graduates. So my role is working with the talent acquisition team on the recruitment side. So making sure that we get all you lovely guys applications screened and get back to every single person who applies, through to before everybody starts, making sure that we've got rotations in place, through to looking after everybody when they join, putting on learning and development events. And effectively, I like to think of myself as the first 2 years tour guide. So just helping people find their way through the business.
That's a really nice thing to say, and really nice way to put it, Kerry. So obviously I kind of briefly introduced Johnson Matthey at the beginning, but I know, Kerry, that you're keen to cover some common misconceptions, catalytic converters for one.
Catalytic converters.
So, yeah. So when a graduate, comes to our assessment centres or they're involved in the application process, what kind of common misconceptions do you have to clear up with them when they are applying?
So I think it's one of those really interesting things that, Johnson Matthey, we're a global company, we're a FTSE 100 company, and yet nobody has the first clue what we do. And if they do, they think that we make catalytic converters and that's it. And that's absolutely true, but that's part of a much bigger piece. So we're a global sustainability company. So we specialize in chemical R&D and engineering manufacturing. So we have 4 different sectors. So clean air is the automotive side, so the catalytic converters that people tend to be more familiar with. We have an efficient natural resources sector, which looks after effectively what it says on the tin. So how to take natural resources and use them in a better way, whether that's streamlining processes, whether that's refining. So everything from sort of catalyst technologies to platinum group metals to the things Krishna was just talking about, and I know Hannah will tell you more about her experiences in PGMS in a bit as well. We have a health sector where we make active pharmaceutical ingredients for medicines, so including anti-cancer treatments to generic drug manufacture. We created something called Bitrex, which, if you haven't heard of Bitrex, is the bitterest substance known to man, and it's absolutely vile. And if you drop a thimbleful in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you can still taste it. It's that strong. And if anybody's sitting watching this thinking, why on earth would you do that? We paint it on the outside, things like washing pods that go in washing machines, so that if kids put it in their mouths, they spit back out. So we do a huge range of weird and wonderful things. And we also have a new markets sector. And new markets looks at some of our up and coming business areas. So the things that we're going to see be so important over the next few years, like fuel cells, battery materials, life science technologies, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to kind of second what you've just said, Kerry, that you've got a video on your hub, which obviously you know about, and it is the testing for the Bitrex and tip. And it's where all the different members of the Johnson Matthey team go through the transitional stage of tasting it. So it's like utter like fear of tasting it, then it goes to the shock, then it goes to the absolute repulsiveness of the taste of it as well. So go onto the hub and watch it. It's really, really funny video. Just shows all the different emotions of going through the process. So yeah, thanks for that, Kerry. And then obviously the grads we've just mentioned they've all been or all on different parts of the graduate programme, so operations, science, commercial. Can you just give me a bit of a mini introduction to each of those?
Sure. So we have these 3 streams because these are where our strategy lies for our future talent. So our science stream tends to focus on the R&D side of the business. So we invest an awful lot of money in R&D each year. So in terms of kind of degree disciplines, we look for people from chemistry, chemical engineering, material science, natural sciences, that sort of thing to fit into those. Our operations stream is operations/engineering. So that can tie into the ops side, EHS, manufacturing, process, that side of things. And then our commercial stream tends to be anything that's outward facing. So anything that has a connection through to either customers or suppliers. So sales, marketing, procurement. We include digital transformation in there as well, internal customer sales, as well as external account management.
Perfect, thank you.
A wide variety.
Yeah, there is a wide variety, and we're really lucky as well to be joined by the grads today who have their brilliant individual stories about how they've transitioned through the process and everything else. So really good introduction. Now, Kerry, when we've been speaking in the past for the past however many years, something that I really like about Johnson Matthey is the development opportunities. Now, we are going to touch on these a little bit later, but there are some fantastic opportunities, and the graduates can really develop their own opportunities at Johnson Matthey. Now, have you got anything that you wanted to add about that? What kind of development opportunities are on offer? There's the 2 development weeks.
Sure. Yeah, so I think we look at development in 2 different ways. So we look at it through our rotations. So every graduate undertakes 3 8-month rotations within their stream within the first 2 years, and we'll move them across sectors and across regions. And that gives them the opportunity to get a really wide view of everything that happens at Johnson Matthey, but also to carry lessons learned from one placement through to the next. And what's really nice about it, and hopefully the graduates won't all sit there shaking my heads when I say this and go, no, it's horrible, Kerry, is that we assign the first rotation, but for the second and third rotations, the graduates get a huge amount of say in what it is that interests them. So no 2 graduates will ever have the same career journey. It's absolutely tailored to their passions, their interests, and their personal development. So if we've got somebody on the operations stream who wants to be chartered in IChemE, we can make sure that we work with them to align placements that will allow them to get through that process, for example. So that's sort of the on-the-job side of the training and development, but underpinning that we have a development program as well. So we do all of the usual things that you'll find in most places. So presentation skills and influencing and that sort of thing. We also do 2 leadership weeks. So the first one focuses on team effectiveness, and in a very experiential way. There's not a huge amount of classroom based. I can see Krishna grinning at me because she has memories of being stood in a field, getting very cold and having a lot of fun. And the second one focusing on developing the individual as a leader. So as you're coming to the end of the program, you've got that awareness of your own leadership styles. But we also offer out a business project each year. So it tends to be almost a bit of a blank page exercise. So we work with the board to see what is the strategy that's coming down the line. And to give you the example of the one we've just completed with the 2018 graduates, they were set a task of, if the CEO was to give you £100,000 to forward our sustainability agenda, what would you do? And it was as broad as that. So it's an absolute blank page to go away, to come up with these ideas, which are then presented back to the chief exec, the CTO, and the panel to get some real senior level exposure. But they're now looking at those at the moment to see how they can be taken forward and implemented. So it's not a theoretical based activity. This is how you can make an absolute difference to the future and the strategy of JM. Yeah,
I think you're just going to learn so much, aren't you? Just presenting in front of the board as well, which I'd be absolutely terrified about. But and again, am I right in saying you mentioned about the graduate programme? So the second and the third placement are quite tailor-made to the grads, but even the first placement, I'm sure when we've spoken previously, you kind of look at their CVs, their previous experiences. So you even tailor the very first placement to the graduates.
Absolutely. So we look at what people have studied as part of their degree, particularly on the science stream, because we want people to be able to start adding value early on and to really kind of embrace their opportunity. So if they do something that's semi-familiar, that always helps. So we look at that, conversations that we've had at assessment centres, any conversations that we've had along the way. So normally we'll make offers after assessment centres by sort of early February time. The placements won't get locked in until June. So I've got a few months to start chatting to people and work out where their passions lie and align it accordingly. And you know what a lot of people say? I don't know, because you don't know. You haven't been here before. You've got nothing to hang it on, and that's absolutely fine. That's why we do that piece for you. But where it comes to the other two, I go out to the business and I ask them for roles, and we normally have 3-4 times as many roles as we do graduates. So there's just such a huge selection to choose from.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kerry. And Kerry's going to join us at the end of the webinar as well. Kerry and her team are currently sifting applications, so she's got lots of hints and tips that are going to make sure that you get through the process. So keep watching. Kerry, thank you very much. We'll join you again later. And Soph, over to you.
Thank you, Carla. So yeah, I'm going to start by talking to you, Krishna, today about your journey as you've been there the longest, and we'll go over to Dominic and then to Hannah. But what's going to be really interesting for the audience today, I think, is how different all three of your journeys have been. So starting with you, obviously, we heard that you did your undergraduate and then went on to do a PhD and then joined Johnson Matthey. And you touched upon how you were first introduced to Johnson Matthey, but could you tell us kind of what really attracted you to applying for the graduate scheme?
Yeah, so I was looking around sort of at Johnson Matthey as a company because it really interested me that those were the kind of chemicals that they actually make, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do basically as well, because even now I'm still at that stage. Just a bit of advice for all the graduates out there: it's okay if you don't know what to do. There's so many opportunities like out there to grow and develop. So even now, after doing 8 years at university and 2 years within Johnson Matthey, I'm still not 110% sure. But and I was looking, and particularly the efficient natural resources sector sort of called out to me, because I really like the ethos behind it about actually trying to utilize these resources that we've got. And I've recently done a project actually looking more closely at the critical raw materials around the world, and how we can sort of utilize that list within Johnson Matthey and make things better. So that's what sort of really attracted me to the science, and that was at the core of it. I really wanted to make sure I did science that I enjoyed and didn't just necessarily get put into an area that I didn't like. When that was the main thing that attracted me. And then looking at the graduate program, I love the fact that I'd have the opportunity to see different parts of the business. Because as Kerry said, you sort of go in, you do go in blind, like to Johnson Matthey, like unless you know someone who have been there before, you don't truly know the broad range of things that they do. And even to this day, every day, I'm sure I'm learning, saying, oh, I didn't know we did that. Oh, that was us. So honestly, we're always learning more about what we do. So yeah, I really enjoyed the fact that we were going to be able to look around the different sectors and also just go around the UK as well, because personally I didn't know where I want to settle or anything like that, so I was like, so I get to travel around the UK too. It's an amazing opportunity to see the different sites. I think we're going to touch on like what the different cultures are at the different sites. So yeah.
Okay, lovely, thanks Krishna. So joining Johnson Matthey from a kind of a long time in academia, you know, 8 years of working in that way. I know there probably will be a lot of our audience who are thinking that maybe they want to stay and do a master's or a PhD and then maybe go into industry or vice versa. And you can probably give them a really good insight into what are the differences of being in academia and working in industry.
Yeah, so particularly doing a PhD, it is a very sort of long project that you get set. It was 4 solid years of sort of one thing that I'm looking at. And in academia, you do get that chance to sort of sometimes look more at the fundamentals of chemistry, or depending on which area that you're in, and you do look more at the fundamentals. So all the theory that you kind of learn at your undergraduate, you actually kind of put it into practice a bit more during PhDs. You also get the opportunity actually to do a lot of sort of leadership stuff in terms of looking after, so you guys as undergraduates, I'm sure some of you have come into the PhD labs for your final year placements and things like that. So we get the opportunity to teach, which was an amazing experience for me during my PhD, definitely. And being able to just have sort of that freedom to be able to kind of explore. And it's something that probably a misconception of mine at the time, because I never spent time in industry. I did think that industry it's all about the business, exactly what they need to do and that sort of it. But actually, since I've joined Johnson Matthey, I've realised that how big research and development still is within industry. And it's something that Johnson Matthey really do strive on. And we actually do have 2 technology centres based in the UK, which is pure research and development, pure R&D. And I've actually did 2 of my placements actually, one at our site in Chiltern and one at our site in Sonning. And it's actually a very similar environment to academia in terms of you're doing the fundamental research. Yes, it is geared towards our strategy and our goals and our vision, but you do still get that freedom to explore a bit more and do some of that fundamental core science, which underpins a lot of our sort of main operations as well.
Great. I hoped you were going to touch on that, because I thought that's probably a misconception that a lot of students have, is that in order to really kind of get that depth in that research and development, that, you know, a PhD is the only kind of way to do it, where actually it's so integral to industry. So yeah, that's really great that you touched upon that as well there. So kind of moving on to your time at Johnson Matthey now, because I know obviously you've been there 2 years, you've been through the graduate programme, and what was really fascinating listening to you, you know, running up to the webinar, was how you really got to define your own career. And this is obviously what Kerry was touching upon as well. So can you start by telling us a little bit about what placements did you do during the graduate programme, and how did you decide that's where you wanted to go?
Yeah, so as I said, I came from a background doing organometallic chemistry, so all the chemists out there hopefully know what I'm talking about. But particularly in my application and through my interviews, I did say that I do want that industry experience. I want to see scale up. I want to see the processes going from what we sort of star core at the university, which does sometimes go through to industry. And that was taken on board, definitely. So my first placement was based in our technology centre up in Chiltern. So that's near Middlesbrough for those guys who don't know the UK too well, because I didn't know where it was, to be honest. Yeah. I still remember getting a phone call from Kerry saying, "Oh, you're going to be in Chiltern," and I was just like, I don't know where that is. So up north, which I do love, and there I actually worked on zeolites there, and so that was working a lot, completely different to my background actually. So during my PhD, I was doing things that were air sensitive, moisture sensitive, and like 2 to 3 milliliters is probably the biggest scale that I ever went to. Whereas here I was doing like 5-litre reactors, which were like making gigantic vats of white powders. And I was just like, oh my God, it's so different, but it was an amazing experience, definitely. And again, that was when I got introduced to the technology centre and saw how much our core research is actually going on, which was amazing. So after the first few months of me being within Johnson Matthey, I was like, I do actually want to start thinking about where I want to go. So as Kerry said, people from the business really want us graduates. So there is a lot of choice out there, but you get the opportunity as well to try and organise your own projects. And that's something that I sort of decided that actually I'm going to see if I can find something that I actually really want to do within the business. And through the graduate programme, we get assigned mentors. And so I spoke to my mentor, who put me in touch with a couple of different people that I could speak to, had some good conversations. And because this was the first year that we went through the global scheme, a lot of people within Johnson Matthey weren't aware that, oh, I could have a graduate. And I was just like, yeah, you can have me if you want. So it was a really good networking opportunity to actually expose the graduate programme to the entirety of the company. and actually be able to get some projects out there that they probably never would have put in the first place, which was great. And some of the projects are still going now from some of the conversations that I initially had, which is amazing to actually see, which is good. So for my second placement, I moved down to our site in Royston, which is our biggest site, and worked actually within our noble metals factory, which is actually more operational, but they do have a small technical team which work there. And that was a really good experience because that role itself was actually quite non-lab based. So I just wanted to see what research could be like outside of the lab. I'd spent so long in the lab. I was like, right, can I do research outside of the lab as well? And I tailored that so I was learning these modeling skills at the same time as they were utilizing my chemistry skills as well. So I did a lot of analytical chemistry to help out the team. So it was a nice sort of balance of being able to utilize my skills for the team and then me learning something new. And then an opportunity came up quite organically just through conversations that they were looking for an organometallic chemist to sort of help out with some projects in Royston and Sonning, sorry. And I was having these conversations with the people in Royston because there's a lot of collaboration between the technology centre and the business as well. So I actually went back into organometallic chemistry within Johnson Matthey, which I think was a weird, nice little full circle for me because I got to see what organometallic chemistry research is like within industry. And again, I had that amazing freedom to explore different things, but then it had that very, very strict end goal of we want to scale this up. And I actually started to see the process start being scaled up into production, which was, again, an amazing experience to see my work actually go through those stages, and it's going to be used to make materials for our customers. So that was great. And just to finish off, because I've got a bit of a long story at JM, but to go into sort of my final role, which I'm in now as a development chemist, as I said, my initial interest was in the efficient natural resources sector. And that's actually still stuck, even though I've seen so many different parts of the business, that sort of passion for that chemistry is still there. And I really wanted to learn about our refining business, because that is something that essentially what the company was built on. Is looking at refining our precious metals. So again, through the network that you slowly sort of build throughout the graduate program, being able to speak to different people from different parts of the business, managed to actually organise this sort of secondment year in the refining technical team. And again, totally new area of chemistry for me. I've never done anything like this before. So it's slightly terrifying in that sense, but they're trying to utilise my skills with what I already know and apply it to their sort of chemistry that they're doing. So that's currently the stage that I'm at.
That's great. I mean, I love the fact that you were able to basically go around the whole of Johnson Matthey and say, right, this is where I want to go and this is what interests me. Do you want me? And, you know, how your skills have then helped in departments that perhaps people hadn't really considered before. And having that experience straight out of university and going into your first role just sounds like it must be really, really valuable and something that you must get a lot of joy out of as well when you're going through the program. There were some technical things that went over my head when you were talking, so I'm going to circle back a little bit and just kind of, because I know obviously on the call we've got students who are first year graduates and probably up to PhD. So you mentioned your second placement was around noble metals.
Yes.
Now that means nothing to me. So can you just kind of like tell us a little bit more about that, what that means?
Yeah, so it's mainly looking at the precious metals part of the periodic table. So this is platinum, palladium, iridium, ruthenium, rhodium. I should know all of these. And we do some more metals as well, sort of like work with tungsten and gold and silver as well. So they're sort of the basic noble metals. And within the actual factory itself, we actually receive from the refinery the actual pure metal that has been purified out. And then they actually 100% old school, I'm not even lying when I say this, the machine they use is about 200 years old, essentially a giant hammer which actually bashes out the molten metal into bars. It's honestly, it's mad, like it shakes the whole building. You wouldn't think it, but they were like, it's had a repaint but it's still 200 years old. I was like, that's mad. And then they within the factory itself, they sort of go from the bars and they draw it down into different things. So that if they need it as pellets, if they need it as wires, we make like metallic gauze for ammonia oxidation. We make all sorts of like thin, fine wire parts of like ignition sources and things like that. So again, I just can't list them all because I only sort of managed to find out half of the things that we actually do. But it's where there's a lot of sort of old school hands-on metal work that actually goes on. So, amazing place.
Great. Okay, that made it definitely a lot clearer for me. And then, as we said at the beginning, we're going to touch upon the different locations that you've been in. So you've mentioned up in the north in Middlesbrough, that you've been at Royston, which is in Hertfordshire, and then also around London as well. Is that right?
Sonning and Reading. Yeah.
Reading. Sorry.
Yeah.
So obviously that's three very quite different locations. So can you, from a Johnson Matthey perspective, how did the locations differ and what makes the sites different?
Yeah, so yeah, all the sites are very, very different. I'll start off with Royston because that is our biggest site. It's essentially headquarters. So we do have a lot of offices based there. That's where mainly our clean air plant is, where our refinery is, which is part of Efficient Natural Resources as well. And we've always got bits and bobs of other things. So we've got a bit of some new markets come in battery materials. So if I'm right, Kerry, it's 2,000 to 3,000 people, I think, at least, our headquarters. So it's a very, very big site. So even when some of the other graduates were working there, I was like, it would go sometimes weeks without seeing them because they're just on the total opposite side of sites. And it literally takes about 10 minutes to walk around just to get there. So it's a great place to actually see because it is sort of essentially the heart of JM, sort of everything that goes on, and you get to see so much. Up north in Chiltern near Middlesbrough, I think that's one of the greatest sites as well, actually, because it doesn't only have the technology centre, it also has our battery materials sector, part of our efficient natural resources sector, and also down the road there's sort of, well, there's 3 other sort of Johnson Matthey sites, some very smaller satellite sites as well around. So there's a lot of different things going on. So although the community is a lot smaller, about 300 people, I'd say, up north, because there's so many different technologies going on, you get to meet so many different kind of people, and because it's all on one site as well, you sort of integrate quite a lot more, whereas that is a bit more difficult at Royston because it's so big. Yeah. It is sometimes there's always a new person that you've not met before, shall we say. Yeah. Whereas up north, sort of, you can handle about that many people and you kind of see the same people coming in at the same time and stuff like that. And it was a really, really nice place to be, and I got to know quite a lot of people there that I still keep in touch with. That's really nice. Mm-hmm. And then going down to our site in Sonning, which is in Reading, so it's on the outskirts. Gotta say, it's definitely one of our prettiest sites. I think everyone's got to agree with that. It's actually sort of built off the side of an old manor house. It's beautiful, and the gardens are lovely. So it was a joy to be there over summer, I tell you that. So you go sit out on the grass and have some lunch, and IT are ever so kind that they've boosted the Wi-Fi, so you can actually go have meetings outside as well. It's amazing. But the actual site itself is our technology centre. So there's nothing else on that site besides the technology centre. And again, there's probably about 250 people who are based there. And it's not that they do just one thing. So this is our tech centre, which supports all different parts of the business. So they're involved in clean air and efficient natural resources in all our new market sectors as well. So, and our health business that honestly links to everywhere. Everyone's doing a different project. You speak to someone, they're like, oh, I'm working on that. Or they'll say, oh, I worked on that like 20 years ago. I was like, oh my God, how long have you been here? It's mad. And what's nice about technology centres as well, it actually has that good link to university. So that's where we get a lot of our university placement students come through, particularly for science and chemistry, who come through and they do the placements and stuff. So it still has that very sort of academic feeling, which is quite nice actually. Yeah. As you go through. And also something I'm probably going to mention as well in terms of PhDs, if people are thinking, shall I do a PhD? Shall I go into industry? I'm not sure. Johnson Matthey do actually support people to go through PhDs, so particularly through the technology centres where core research does happen. So just because you go into industry doesn't mean you can't do a PhD. My PhD supervisor actually went into industry for 10 years and then went back into academia and is now a professor. So again, just for an example, just because you choose one path, it doesn't solidify it forever.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Krishna. And finally, before we move on to Dominic, every year at Johnson Matthey, you have a sort of specific development objective that you want to achieve. So can you just kind of tell us finally what is yours for this year, and how are you going to achieve that for this year?
Yeah, so I particularly wanted to actually look at the operation side of my role. So my development objective this time is actually quite focused, quite technically actually. Usually development objectives are looking at your soft skills. But actually I've just completed my chartership in chemistry, so I've done a lot of work towards that. So I was like, I want to try and do something a bit more technical. So it's sort of my goal to try and understand our flow sheets of the refinery, which again, flow sheets to me, I ain't got a clue. So that's my skills to develop, sort of looking more at operational things, and then I'll be presenting that back to the rest of the team. So I'll get a chance to sort of demonstrate my presentation skills, like showing technical things, and also showing that to sort of the non-technical audiences, to helping the commercial team understand what's going on. So that's one thing that's really strong, is the bonds between the commercial teams and the science teams.
Yeah.
Because that's a really important understanding, so making sure everyone's on the same page about some technical things. Otherwise, if that communication's not there, it's lost. Sort of thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that leads me on very nicely to Dominic, actually. So thank you very much for that. It's great to hear from you on that, and your journey and your experience so far. So yeah, I'm going to head over to Dominic. Hi, Dominic.
Yeah, hi.
You did a chemistry degree, as we heard at the beginning, but you have actually gone into a commercial role at Johnson Matthey. And as Krishna said, obviously there's a lot of linkage between the technical, the science, and the commercial aspect. So can you just explain initially what you are now doing at Johnson Matthey?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I'm working in our procurement function. So I'm working in a group function that sort of sits across the business, and it's sort of global procurement. And I work as a sort of responsible sourcing lead. So I'm working on sort of policy and strategy for the procurement function in regards to responsible sourcing. So yeah, it's all the sort of ethical, sustainable issues around how we source materials, and what our strategy for that is going forward.
Fabulous. Well, we're going to come back to that in a bit more detail, but before we go on to finding out exactly, more detail what you're doing about right now, we did touch upon during the introduction as well the fact that you did a year-long placement before you joined Johnson Matthey, but not with Johnson Matthey. And something that's come out quite a lot of our webinars so far is how important doing a year in industry or a year-long placement, whatever you might want to call it, is to a student, whether you decide to return to the same employer or use that experience to decide what you want to do in the future. So you did your placement at Mondelez, and what experience did you gain there that you feel have helped to guide your career and helped you in your role now that you're at Johnson Matthey?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's such a valuable experience to do those sort of placement years, especially for my one. I was doing a year and also doing my exams and lectures at the same time. So, there's no question of having good time management or not. You just have to, otherwise you just sink under everything, doing 9 to 5 and doing lectures at the same time. So, absolutely it sort of reinforces those sort of organizational and time management skills, and just really helps you sort of identify what you want to do. I guess it keeps you driven in that way. And so although I got loads of good technical and also just general experience from being in a business, seeing what actually happens in sort of a commercial lab sort of environment, and seeing what business actually looks like, some of the key takeaways were just actually doing that application process in the first place. Trying to find an internship is really difficult as well, so you have to be prepared to do that. And so actually a lot of those skills that I sort of were testing the first time when it came to looking for a graduate placement, I think are really useful, because you already know that you have to get in early, that you have to prepare for those sort of questions, what you're going to be asked, you're going to have to do these interviews, video interviews, etc. So actually that's really valuable experience in itself, even if you're just applying for internships. So I think yeah, definitely there's a lot that you get from doing a placement year.
Mm-hmm. And because you did sort of a more technical based placement, you then decided that actually that you wanted to go into a more commercial role at graduate level. So what really kind of led you to that decision to then apply for a more commercial vacancy at JM?
Sure. So it was, it was really, as I was in the lab, sort of looking around at what sort of jobs were available after I come out of uni, I was thinking, do I want to be in the lab? What am I actually enjoying about my role at the moment? And for me, it was the bits I liked were the problem solving, the talking to the client after we'd fixed a problem. So we used to file the report. We used to have a conversation with the client about how to, what happened, how to fix things, etc. So those were the bits I enjoyed. So when I was looking at, what I wanted to do next, it was actually, I don't think I want to sit in the lab and do sort of experiments, and especially for some of the things I was seeing, it seemed to be sort of repetitive, sort of, I wouldn't say that that's what typifies, that sort of job, but it's just that was my sort of own personal view of what I wanted to be doing. So absolutely, it was, let's do something different that's going to be out of my comfort zone, and that has all the elements I enjoy, so the problem solving, the sort of communication aspects to it. So that's what kind of led me down that path.
Brilliant. And what initially attracted you to Johnson Matthey when you were looking for those graduate jobs then?
So it was actually my interest in science still, and the fact that it's a sustainable company. So, even though I wanted to move into a commercial role, obviously I had just done 4 years of chemistry, and I am interested in science, passionate about science. So I wanted to keep my hand in some way to a science company. And obviously Johnson Matthey is a science company, but it's also a sustainable company as well. And that's something that you can see throughout the values and everything that we do is that sustainable focus. So that's something else that drew me. And then the fact that there was a graduate scheme and offered a commercial placement was just the sort of the icing on the cake. So it was just like finalized, yeah, let's try here and see what happens. And that's where I ended up, luckily.
And it all came together for you.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and so at the moment you are in the commercial function, as you kind of introduced. What benefit do you think having that chemistry science-based background brings to your commercial role now within Johnson Matthey?
So I think one of the key benefits is, as I mentioned previously, is Johnson Matthey is still a science company, and a lot of people in it are scientists, and a lot of the things we do are based around science. So at least you have some sort of rudimentary understanding of what people are talking about, and you're able to sort of communicate quite easily with the other people in the business, because a lot of people, as I said, have that sort of background, and say you're sort of speaking the same language and you understand what they're saying, but at the same time you have those skills like the problem solving, the data analysis, that actually help you day to day with what you're going to be doing. So those are really important in just the way you think about things. So your logical sort of way that you approach problems and try to solve them, just sort of is a varied way of thinking, I think.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important point there, Dominic, because it's something that we often say to students is how transferable your skills are. Just because you're studying chemistry doesn't mean that you have to stay within a science-based role. There's so many different organisations out there that want to use that knowledge that you've got in science for a more commercial type vacancy. So you are living proof of that. So at the moment, you've kind of touched upon the basics of your vacancy, but if you could, of your graduate program now, could you talk to us in a little bit more detail about what your current role is, what type of sort of day-to-day activities you get up to?
Sure, yeah. So as I said, my current role is dealing with sort of responsible sourcing strategy. So a lot of the work I do is talking to internal stakeholders across the business. So I talk to people in procurement, I talk to people in also our ethics and compliance functions, our sustainability functions, and sort of get their feed into what's going on, what the strategy should be, and then also present that information upwards as well. So to senior stakeholders. So it's really about collating that information and forming sort of presentations and cases for what we should be doing going forward.
Great. And so your role at the moment is based in, like you said, a group function. So that means that you're exposed to lots and lots of different sectors. So all the sectors that Kerry's kind of mentioned at the beginning about what JM do, you have a broad overview of that. So Can you tell me a little bit more about the benefits that you think that you're getting out of the role, being involved in across everything so far?
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the things I do talk to people from the sectors quite often, and across the different sectors, so you're able to sort of network and actually understand a little bit of what actually is going on in each sector. So I do speak to people from health, I do speak to people from the battery materials and the clean air sectors. So you're actually getting a little bit of an insight without having to sort of go there, because there's not even enough placements to go all the way around JM. So it's actually just nice to be able to see, oh, actually this is the sort of things that are out there as well, just from that perspective. But then also to be able to sort of network and have some contacts in that business is also another really useful thing. And absolutely, as you go through into my next placement, I'll be able to sort of, if I need something from, or just want to chat with those people, I'll know who they are already. So I think it's really valuable in just building your network as well.
Definitely, and that's something that Kerry actually mentioned in the lead up to the webinars, was how Johnson Matthey want their graduates to know about everything. They want them to understand the whole Johnson Matthey business, and it sounds like you're kind of in a really key position to do that. And like you said, kind of building those connections that can guide you on where you might want to go next, and also support you when you get into those roles. So finally then, Dominic, what is your next placement going to be? If we could have a little sneak peek, and what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, sure. So my next placement is it's in that efficient natural resources sector. And I'm going to be doing sort of a market management / business development type role. So it's going to be looking at some of the IP that we have in Johnson Matthey, and how we're using the IP, what our strategy is for that, and also what sort of business cases there are going forward, and which customers to target with new products, and what products we should be developing, and how we should be developing them as well. So it's a lot of sort of business development, quite technical and IP focused.
Great.
Should be really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much for that, Dominic. That was a really great insight, and again, it's good to hear, going from a science into a commercial role, and how that all links together. So finally, we're going to go and speak to baby Hannah, who's not really a baby. So you have, as you said, Hannah, you've only been at Johnson Matthey on the graduate scheme for 1 month so far, but you did do a placement with Johnson Matthey before you joined as a graduate. So can you tell us a little bit about your kind of journey to Johnson Matthey and how you kind of ended up where you are now?
Yep, so last year in my final year of my degree, so my master's year, I had an opportunity to do a 6-month industrial placement. So it's a bit awkward, because usually, you do a summer or a year-long placement. So doing a 6-month placement actually kind of like put me into a position where I had to go out and approach businesses, different companies that I was interested in, and try and see if they had a role that I could help out with. So I got really good exposure through that, sort of having to contact different people, sending out random emails. So through that, I got in touch with a contact in Johnson Matthey that I literally found on the website. That's how sort of vague it was. And after speaking to a couple of different people, it came back that one person who had a potential project knew my personal tutor and one of my lecturers at university. So I got back in touch with them, asked for some references, and then that's how it all kind of kick-started. So through that just brief experience, I was just kind of exposed to how helpful and friendly everyone is in JM. If someone couldn't answer my query, couldn't help, the email got passed on elsewhere. So that was a really sort of good start to my career journey with JM. So actually for my placement, I worked in the efficient natural resources sector. So I was based in Brimsdown, which is very North London, so just inside the M25. So I don't know, I class it as London, some people won't. Yeah. So there I was based in sort of the development kind of team. So at the minute, they are building a new refinery, which is based in Royston, but a lot of the development work is done in So I was working a lot at doing experiments at lab scale, which was very different to kind of what I'd done at uni, a lot more sort of science based. So that was really great exposure to something else. And then I worked from scaling things up from lab scale to pilot plant. So I worked in a pilot plant, and then that is now being scaled up to full scale. And now I'm working at Royston on my first rotation. I can actually see that building, it has been constructed and things are going in. So it's been really nice to sort of, although I've moved away from that sector and things, that I still do see sneak peeks of what's going on. I still do chat to my old team and find out how things are going, especially with COVID, find out how things have been impacted. So yeah, so that kind of covers my placement and things. So then when I was on placement, I mean, I was working in ENR, so it is a lot more based on your metal refining and things, how most people view Johnson Matthey as a business. But I started to learn that there was a lot more to JM, and there's so many different sectors, so many different things to find out about. So through that, I started to inquire about the graduate program. And I spoke to a couple of the current grads. I actually spoke to Krishna when I was on placement. She delivered a presentation at one of the conferences that I attended. So through that, I just sort of started to get to know more about the grad program, asking people about their personal experiences, and just hearing how positive everyone was about it. It encouraged me to apply.
Lovely. And doing your placement with Johnson Matthey and then applying to the graduate scheme, did that give you any kind of advantage during the graduate application process, or how did that work when you came to that stage of going through there?
So when it came to applying for the graduate program, I wasn't put at any advantage in that I, got forwarded through stages or anything. I still went through every stage as everyone else did. I mean, the only way that I felt at an advantage was that I maybe knew a little bit more about the company, but that doesn't mean to say that someone who hasn't worked at JM can't find out about it. There's, take our names from today, get into contact with us. We can tell you even more about the program if we haven't been able to answer questions today. Through the website, there are so many ways to find out about what JM does. So yes, maybe I felt a bit more in my comfort zone, especially when I went to assessment centre. It was like, oh, I recognise this, this room. I've been in it before. I've delivered a presentation. So maybe just from a comfort perspective, but when it comes to applying, the recruiters very much look at you, your skill sets, and how you've developed through your degree, through any placements you've done. It's not about where you've learned these skills. So it's not, have you been in a global company before? Have you worked in JM? If you've worked in a small scale startup, that's just as good. If you've got the skills that they're looking for, then great.
So it's very much based on your merit rather than, if you've necessarily been in JM before.
Yeah, very much. It's all just about selling yourself, and you always got to drive your own career path and things. So if you've taken the opportunities to find placements, if you've really pushed yourself, put yourself outside your comfort zone, things like that, they're definitely going to focus a lot more on that than, oh, where was it that you worked?
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, talking about going outside of your comfort zone, so Hannah, your journey and what you've done is quite different as well. So you're originally from the Isle of Man. So when you went to university, you decided to go as far away as humanly possible by going up to Edinburgh. And then when you looked for your placement, you then ended up down near London. So you've had to relocate across the country a few times, which obviously does take you outside of your comfort zone. When you were looking for your placement and then deciding that you obviously, you wanted to go down for JM outside of London, how did you go about, organising accommodation, and what sort of help and advice did you get from members of the JM team when you were looking at that?
So I think the main thing is just contacts. Everyone at JM is so friendly. Like I sort of mentioned before, if anyone can't answer your question, they will direct you to someone who can. So I just sort of, for my placement, started off by talking to my line manager, asking about areas to live, what they recommended. Then if, an area propped up that I said, oh, I was looking here, then they would be okay, let me get in touch with some people. Oh, I know someone who lives in that area, let me put them in contact. So it's very much just, if you have any questions, someone out there is there to help you. And then when it came to the graduate program, I mean, there's so much support. We have graduate buddies, we have buddies within our department, we have our line managers, we have mentors. There's just such a great support network. So I actually got assigned, so we get assigned a graduate buddy who's on the same stream. So that they were assigned back in sort of March time, I think. So even good couple of months before we even find out where we're going. So we can use that as an opportunity to talk to them, find out where they've been located and their experiences. So then when it came to the location, so when I found out I was going to be at Royston, I could then straight away talk to my buddy or talk to someone else that they could put me in contact with who had been in the same location. So they have a big guide that they've compiled, which it outlines all the different sites, and then sort of the do's and don'ts of where to live, where not to live.
Oh, great.
Things like that. So yeah, all the graduates just kind of form one large support bubble, really, which is really, really helpful as well. At like times like now with COVID and everything, you know, you can't go out and meet as many people, so there's just that person you can just quickly drop a message to. And then when it comes to, I mean, I haven't obviously experienced the change of rotation yet, but when it does come to changing rotation, I mean, depending on how far you are moving, you do get allocated a £1,000 relocation bonus.
Okay.
And you are given 2 days off work to facilitate that move. So there's definitely things in place. So it's not a case of you've got to go from Royston to Edinburgh, you finish on Friday, you start your next role on Monday, you have 2 days to get there, and off you go. That is very much supported.
Lovely. That's great to hear. And I think that's really good advice that you've given, and also the kind of support that JM's got there, that, you know, it hopefully will put a lot of our audience's mind at ease when it comes to relocating for a graduate job, but also for a placement opportunity, because we do encourage students to be really flexible on their locations when they are looking at roles. Right, Carla's going to kill me, but I'm going to ask you one more question before we run out of time. Because you're in your current role at the moment, you are a manufacturing engineer at Johnson Matthey. So I just kind of wanted to ask you one final thing. So how does your degree that you studied currently help with your role now, and where do you want to go after this current rotation?
So I think degree wise, I feel like when you're at university, a lot of the stuff you do, you go, oh, am I ever going to use this again? Like, I don't see the applications. I think one of the things that I really disliked during design projects and things for a chemical engineering degree was P&IDs and flow sheets and stuff like that, and you just see a bunch of lines all over a page, and you just, when you're doing it at university, it is all kind of theoretical. You're not building anything, you're not getting this equipment in, so it seems very long-winded and sort of not the best exercise. But now that I am at JM and I am working with different equipment and things, especially now that I'm working from home quite a lot, so I can't get on site as much to see the equipment, you know, follow the pipe work, see how everything links together. P&IDs and flow sheets and stuff actually come into great use. So it is a great way to understand the process without having to be on site and seeing it in person. So I think that side of my degree really has helped, because I can see these P&IDs and okay, my degree has taught me to understand them. What are all the symbols meaning? And now I can like visualize the process, and then I can go into work, I can see it, and you can just make quick connections. If there's an issue on the line, you can just go, okay, right, I know where that's located, I know what it's hooked up to. So that has been really beneficial. I think as well, what sort of Dominic said earlier is just general sort of analytical skills, problem solving from like an engineering science background is just highly beneficial in everything that JM does, because they are so technical. And then finally, also report writing, I think is a key skill. You do a lot of it at uni. You know, you're writing 10,000 words and seems like a slog, but I have decided that I want to work towards my IChemE chartership. So basically starting that now while I'm on the graduate program. And the main thing that you have to do towards that is to write a competence and commitment report, which is like a 3,000 word document. So we've already sort of been, you know, told that if you are straight out of uni, you are kind of at a bit of an advantage there because you have all these report writing skills that you can just implement and make use of straight away.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you very much, Dominic and Krishna. I'm going to hand over to Carla because she's giving me the evils. But it's been really fascinating to hear from all three of you.
Yeah, thank you, really, really great stories, and thank you, Sophie. You are going to get told off after the webinar. So sorry, Kerry, just a quick one from you, my love, if I may. So how would you suggest that we can help our students be successful during the application process for Johnson Matthey?
I think there's a couple of main things, and I will do this super fast. I think as the grads have already alluded to, there's a lot to be said for doing your homework. So absolutely everything that we do in Johnson Matthey is about creating a cleaner, healthier world today and for future generations. So every experiment we run, everything we design, everything we manufacture, all falls into part of that. We all know what we're trying to achieve. So we want graduates to come and work for us who have the same goals and the same ambitions. So when you're answering the application form questions, tell us why you want to work for us, because we know you've got lots of applications to fill in, and we know you're cutting and pasting. And change the name of the company, because an amazing number of applications don't do that, and that's a big no-no. But make it specific. Why do you want to work for us? Why are our values important to you? And all of this information is on our website. So that's kind of the first big one. The second big one is we run what we call rolling recruitment, which means we close roles when we get enough applications, and we're getting a lot of applications this year. So if you do want to apply, I would encourage you to do so within the next week. Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
Perfect. Well, Kerry is because I've had to cut it short because of Sophie Hare-Scott, who's just there on my screen. So what we'll do, Kerry, is I know there's loads of information that you wanted to get out in front of the students. So we'll get together, do a little one-to-one webinar a little bit later on, and we'll put all that information on your hub as well. So just so you know, audience, you're not missing out on any hints and tips. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been brilliant. It's been really fascinating. Don't forget, to our audience, you can rewatch this webinar. Will be live tomorrow, and then what we'll do is we'll work on cutting it up into sections, which should be live early next week. So the next webinar will be with Jessica, who's better at timekeeping than Sophie, and we'll also include Zurich. So Zurich is one of the world's leading insurers, but there's lots that you might not know about them. So register your interest today to attend the webinar next Thursday, and we will see you all next week. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.